I'm Julie Fernandez and welcome to this Peterborough Presents podcast, where we dive into the world of everyday creativity. Everyone listening has a unique creative spark, whether it's showcased through grand professional achievements or a simple innovative idea in their daily routine. Creativity exists within all of us, waiting to be discovered. In each episode, I'll have conversations with a variety of local creatives, poets, crafters, dancers, singers, writers and more, exploring what creativity means to them and its impact on their lives. Whether you're an established artist or someone who feels more practical than imaginative, this podcast is for you. So tune in, creativity may surprise you. I have two lovely guests with me today to talk about crafting and accessibility. And I'd love to start by getting each one of you to tell me your name, what your specialist craft is that you're good at, and a craft that you're not good at. Do you want to start for me?
Okay, my name is Laura Green. I've crafted on and off since I was very, very little, thanks to my nan. One craft she couldn't teach me was crocheting or knitting. Apparently I have uncoordinated hands that work in a way that she's never ever seen before. She had never failed to teach anyone how to crochet or knit before, but I was the one that broke her. So although I love those crafts and I love what people create with them, I can't manage those. So I focused more on paper crafting, mixed media, a bit of anything, home decor especially. I love upcycling things, and some fabric crafting, but I also write.
That sounds interesting. We're going to dig into that in a little while. And tell me, who are you? What is your craft and what is not your craft?
I'm Hannah. I'm an artist. I enjoy painting both traditionally and digitally. I sometimes do crochet, sometimes do papercraft and some writing. Something I've not really been able to do is sort of like those crafts with paper where people cut them out with a craft knife. I don't have the ability to control my hand or put the pressure in that way.
No, I totally get that, and I think all three of us are into our crafts, aren't we? Like you would say things like paper crafting, crochet, knitting, all that, and that is a soft craft.
Yeah.
And am I right in saying we all have different health conditions and disabilities?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you had to adapt the crafts and what you do specifically around your health condition in terms of how you do it and the equipment you use? Hannah, is that something that you've had to think about?
I think so. I really like the style of oil paintings, but I cannot stand the smell of certain types of oil paints. And a lot of the time when I'm doing most of my crafts, actually, I have to wear supports on my wrists, otherwise I can't draw for very long. I can draw for a while, but I can't type on a computer for more than a few minutes at a time without them.
Do you use any, or have you come across and used any adaptive equipment that helps you, like voice? So if typing is a bit tricky, have you ever used a voice-activated software?
No, I haven't done that, but I do have set up around my computer where I do drawing. I have an armrest system so that I'm not having to hold my arm at an uncomfortable angle whilst I'm drawing, and I put a little cushion in front of my keyboard so as to help support my wrists in addition to the supports that I wear.
That's brilliant. And how about you, Laura? Have you ever used any adaptive equipment?
I've used voice to type a few times. With mixed results, although to be fair, that was about 10 years ago. And I only knew it existed because I was at uni, and for the first time there was actually an access coordinator there that was fantastic and explained that approach. I find just the concentration aspect more than the actual kind of physical health of things can be a problem. I have sort of chronic health conditions, so they tend to work on fatigue, pain. So concentration can be very kind of much of a struggle. So the main ways I adapt to it is mainly sort of having some smaller craft quick projects.
Yes.
Because the worst thing is getting started on something, getting really excited about it, and then not having the energy, and it's sitting there for months and months on end until you feel you can go back at it again. So I tend to keep smaller shorter projects. Also things that I can do either in bed, so either sitting up in bed or laying down in bed. So there's a lot of crafting that I picked purposely for that specific aspect. So even anything from like needle felting, I can do that on like a little tray.
Yeah.
And those can be done relatively quickly. And also, if you're fed up and angry, the stabbing motion of the little barbed needle as you bang it in it is very therapeutic. And then sometimes it's bigger. I've even, tried to do more messier things, and that can work okay. Occasionally, you spill glue or paint on things you shouldn't do, but it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But mostly, it's just about kind of adapting what I can do when I can do it. So part of the reason why I kind of enjoyed so many different crafts is sometimes depending on the nature of the condition or how you are, means I might not be able to do needle felting or sewing with my hands because my hands hurt that day, so therefore it will be something else. I've started to use more kind of voice recordings to help with like the poetry and the writing side of things.
Okay.
So if I'm not able to hold a pen or type or, deal with the computer screen on, that kind of thing, that I can just talk into it, even laying down.
And you can do that on your mobile as well, can't you?
It's got a lot better now. So before, like when I was eating like 10 years ago, they would give you a dictaphone. And now, of course, I think it's all nice and convenient on the phone, so that helps. So I've been making like voice notes and things like that. That helps with the editing, and also reading it back on the voice notes too, so I can see if anything hits out of place. Because the other thing I think, when you've got a lot of issues or maybe barriers to crafting, is it tends to be quite isolating, so you tend to be on your own a lot, so you don't always have kind of feedback, or certainly not immediate feedback on what you've got, so you do have to kind of adjust a little bit. Things are a little bit better in the crafting world, I think, in certain respects, in that there's a lot more kind of online to support it. So anything from Facebook groups to even the shopping channels where they do demonstrations, to YouTube videos, Instagram and all that lot. They've got a lot more accessible kind of things out there that you can even watch and do at home that are shorter and briefer. And then you can dip in and out of those too. So
that's really interesting.
I definitely understand what you said about having different types of arts and crafts for different days according to how you're feeling. I experience that as well, that on some days if I'm feeling really creative, then I'm more able to do the drawing or the writing, but other days actually it's really helpful to be able to just make a card or something in maybe an hour without having to think as hard, that it enables me to still feel like I've made something and use that creativity, but not also tie myself up further in the process.
Hannah, tell me a bit about your creative process. You just mentioned that. So your main art is drawing, painting, either digitally or traditionally. What do you like drawing? How do you get the inspiration for it, and what process do you go through?
That's definitely different across the two disciplines. Traditionally, I tend to paint a lot of landscapes or architecture. That's the thing I gravitate to most in traditional things. Sometimes I'll work from a photograph of somewhere I've been, but often it's just that I'll sketch something out that can be an amalgamation of lots of different places and lots of different things that have inspired me. Digitally, I do still do some landscapes digitally, and I've started getting into that a bit more again recently, but I tend to do more characters, often from my own story that I'm slowly working on, or sometimes from a series that I've liked. And so those kinds of ones often start out that I will just sit at my computer sketching random things, different poses, different ideas, and then I'll decide that I like one of the sketches and continue to improve it and refine it, and eventually it becomes a finished painting.
That sounds interesting. Now, you mentioned something about your story. Tell me about that.
It's very much a work in progress, and it's a long-term project, but having found when I was younger that there weren't really the types of stories that I wanted to read out there, certainly in books, I slowly came up with the idea that I wanted to write something. And then this project, as I started drawing different characters, I started having more ideas, and it's slowly kind of grown into something that I hope to continue working on.
That sounds fascinating. And what stories did you find that didn't resonate, or what was you finding that you wanted to read that there wasn't out there?
I think I very much gravitate to the fantasy genre. That's something that I like, and I found I was at a sort of stage in children's books that kind of, I think the 8 to 11, I found various fantasy things that I liked, and then I struggled to find anything that I liked. I didn't really find anything else I really liked until I discovered actually not books but Japanese anime series and manga series, and that actually then became the inspiration for a lot of things. I like a lot of series from that, but also the way in which I draw the characters in my digital illustrations is very much has its roots in that anime manga stylized way of drawing people.
What's your favourite anime series and films?
My all-time favourite anime series is a series called Fairy Tail, but it's spelled Tail by Hiro Mashima.
Excellent. I love me a bit of anime, and it's what's the studios that done Totoro that you have on your bag?
Oh yeah, Studio, I think it's
Ghibli or something?
Ghibli something. I'm not, much as I'm actually learning a bit of the Japanese language, I'm not 100% sure. Ghibli, that might be
So
it.
you're learning Japanese. How interesting. How's that going?
It's going well. I've worked on it consistently. I think I started during the pandemic. Been consistently doing that because I like the sound of the language, having heard it sometimes if there wasn't a dubbed version of an anime series, I'd watch it with subtitles, and I heard the language, I like the sound of the language, I thought it'd be interesting to try and actually learn it so that maybe at some point I could actually watch an episode and not rely on the subtitles but actually be able to understand some of it.
And how's that going?
I don't think I know enough yet to be able to actually watch a series in Japanese, but it's really interesting how the different language structure, and actually I found that because it's with a completely different set of characters to the English letters, I find as a dyslexic that's easier than learning something like French that is using the same set of letters because it's completely different.
Right, so because it's not Latin based, it's easier to understand, maybe.
Because I don't get it confused with English. I can't confuse the two because there is nothing similar.
That's so clever. That's really interesting.
So are you looking to animate the stories as well?
No, animation I found is too tedious, drawing every single frame, but I much more enjoy spending 3 to 5 hours on creating a still painting of some characters and then writing it with words. That I've been working a bit on writing my story, but I really got into creative writing through fan fiction. Actually, that was what got me into it, that I thought actually I wanted to explore different ideas with characters from series I'd really enjoyed, and then from there I've got more into writing my own, and actually I think that's quite a good way to learn creative writing as something you do yourself, because as you write anything, you gradually practice it. And if you start with fan fiction, you've not got that overwhelming feeling that you've got to come up with the world and the story and the characters. Some of that's already there and you learn to reimagine it.
And it's something you're quite familiar with as well, isn't it? So you really know those characters, you can get stuck in and...
Yeah.
Tell me, what is fan fiction?
It's like how people draw fan art, where you draw something from a series. That you see fan art all over the internet, where someone will take a character from a series and then draw a picture of it themselves. And fan fiction is kind of similar in the sense that it's people who enjoy writing, who write about the characters in that series. That it might be that they think about, what would this character's life be like if they lived in a modern setting? Or what would it be like if at this point in the story something else happened, or they went to that place instead, or they didn't talk to this person? That it's really where I think I often can be spawned in places where fans gather on the internet and exchange ideas, and people ask, well, what if this happened instead? And I think that's the starting point for a lot of fan fiction, same as it is for other types of writing, where you think the premise of a novel, the start of a novel can simply be, well, what if you had characters who did this?
That's brilliant. And how about you, Laura? What's your creative process? How do you go from that thought to that finished item?
I'm not a great planner, so I tend to just play. I think play is an underrated sort of aspect of life in general and learning, but especially sort of creatively, it's important to just play around. So sometimes it'll literally just be playing with shapes and see what those shapes start to conform. Because one thing I did like doing a lot was quilting. So getting to play with those patterns and just play around with them, that was always fun. So you could see those things in different ways. Writing-wise, it just comes from either enjoying the sound of a particular word or phrase and then just like recording that and then later maybe expanding out on it. Poetry and script writing is more what I'm sort of writing at the moment.
Okay.
So it tends to be more dialogue based, obviously, with scripting, etc. And then like the poetry is a bit more personal and sort of autobiographical. So that one tends to be a bit like a sort of a mix between, I guess, like a journal in certain respects, and then I just like sort of expand out on it. So it's never literal, but it's, it takes that genesis from normal everyday life.
Have you done much journaling? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there specifically around journaling, not just the words, but what the pictures and the colours and the stickers and the... It looks amazing.
I love combining language with craft as well. So even in like my sewing, it tends to have a lot of language quotes. Trying to do a poem that I made about my granddad, and because sewing came from my nan, and my granddad were incredibly sort of encouraging with everything I did, sort of creatively especially. So my aim is to literally stitch the poem onto a quilt using the quilt to create a scene, as well as sort of bringing in fabrics that relate to them as well. So I like the way that you can cross-craft a lot.
Yes.
And certainly within mixed media, I use because I love books, I do a lot of things with like old vintage kind of aspects and elements too. Some of those things are like old torn book pages, doing found poetry from them. A bit like Hannah was saying with the fan fiction. Literature and creative writing, you've always learned from emulating others. So you would take an existing poem, deconstruct it, change it slightly, or you would do the alternative voice to it, or you would take it back. So I guess fan fiction is just kind of a similar kind of extension of that. It's just a different way of doing it, because it's a great way to learn, experiment, try things, see what does and doesn't fit. I'm not great with form and structure, feeling that tense. I like to expand it out, but it is good to have that knowledge and that practice, because you need to know those rules well before you break them. So have full control over it rather than just it sort of blurting all out. But mine tends to be a bit all over the place, and then eventually it'll start to pull in the right direction. So you just keep playing around until you start to find something that you think actually has a bit of grit, and then you sort of burrow down on it.
Yeah, my process for planning stories is a lot like that I will just start throwing out ideas onto a page and leave them there and look at them in 3 months' time, and slowly some sort of order starts to emerge out of the chaos.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And am I right in thinking, have you both taught as well? And did you do online or in-person classes with what you do craft-wise?
I've taught a few crafting workshops. I was also on some design teams through sort of crafting magazines and like the TV channels. I did a few things from there. So they would send you products, you would make things out of them for them to be put on TV or in the magazines and photographed. And that was great. And that was actually through crafting. I was very isolated for about a good 10 years, pretty much. After I became ill for the second time. So the past 10 years, it was quite isolating. And if it wasn't for crafting, I wouldn't have any real connection with anyone, because I was housebound for a good sort of about 6-7 years of those. So it was very difficult for me to get classes, to see things, to learn things. And then it was only through the shopping channels that did demonstrations and YouTube videos, the craft magazines, and then like the online communities that kind of slowly kind of drew you in. And then after about a year, I got asked to be on a design team. So that was a great kind of boost. And then that helped kind of improve those skills, because it can be costly to get materials and things like that. So it's a way of kind of keeping in there. And it also meant that I got to try different things. So I would often...
Did you teach a couple of classes at Peterborough Presents?
Yeah, I think it was the first one of the International Day with People with Disabilities. I did one, it was in December, and I'd never done a craft. I've taught before, but mainly in classroom settings. So I've never really done a craft session before. And it was thanks to Peter Presents kind of nudging and giving me that confidence and just give it a go and try it, that I did my first kind of more creative
And how did that go?
It was really good, actually. It was, I was super nervous. It was done with mixed media and using vintage elements and people kind of bring them together. And it was very relaxed. I think it should be. I don't think there should be any pressure. And I think it should always be a free space that you just play around. And if you want to take it a different direction, go for it. So it was really nice that everyone was very relaxed and people seemed to have good feedback with it. There was a BSL interpreter. So it was a very relaxed kind of atmosphere, and it was very good, and it was a great confidence builder too.
That's great. And Hannah, did you do taught an online session?
I haven't really taught anything per se, or at least not as the main kind of thing. I've done a sort of a demonstration to do with the Lantern Parade project in I was recently at earlier this year I was at one of the super constructor workshop, teaching people who were then going to lead the rest of the workshops. I was there sort of demonstrating how you would decorate a lantern. I guess the only teaching I've done was had a video filmed of me talking about demonstrating painting a lantern that will then go out with that, and I'm due to help at a further workshop with children about decorating lanterns, and at another 2 even later on in the year than that.
And tell me some of the work and the projects that you've been involved with through Peterborough Presents.
Well, the first one, how I actually got involved, was I heard about the idea of doing something based around light in iVillage. And actually I originally got involved because I have an interest in those kinds of things because I'm very much affected by flashing lights, and more so than just the strobe lights that people think of in terms of seizure risk and that kind of thing, but anything from a light on an ambulance or a roadworks vehicle, the kinds of flashing lights people have on bikes, broken flickering lights in the ceilings, Christmas lights on the wrong setting, all of those kinds of things. And so I really wanted to be involved because since that's the area I'm in, I didn't want to find that there were all these like flashing lights down in the village. So I got involved, and actually it's become such a wonderful project that it's taken that legacy to do with light in the village and made it into something that isn't stressful or problematic, that's really positive and brought a lot of people together. Prior to the project, I'd have said that not many people kind of came together in the village. And then for the first parade, people poured out onto the streets. The high street was full of people. I've never seen it like that. And I've lived in the village most of my life. So that was the first thing. Having been involved in that, and I did decorate a lantern for the first parade.
And didn't you and I do a walk to check that that was accessible?
Yeah, to walk along that route and check that. This year I also went along the route myself in my wheelchair to see what it was looking like and how the pavements were and how it was going to work.
And how were the pavements from a wheelchair user's point of view?
Quite a few of them were unfortunately those sloping ones that kind of slope down to drain the water towards the road and also mean that the wheelchair swerves that way. But other than that, it was mostly right, but I could take photos of things where there were like raised manhole covers or roots breaking through the path. That was how I first got involved with Peter Presents, but then I became involved with the International Day of People with Disabilities, or IDPWD, and later to be known as Reasonable Adjustment Project. And that's been really interesting to be involved in as well, learning about different types of accessibility from all the different people that have been involved in that, and just seeing something about disability come out into an arts thing. Particularly, I was really pleased that last year's involved visual arts, because when I really got into art, you know, my mum would look up things to do with arts and disability, and the only things that were out there really were performing arts. Or they weren't for my type of disability. They'd be specifically for physical disabilities, or they would be for people with more severe forms of learning disability. I didn't find that there was much recognition that people who are autistic at what would be thought of as the sort of Asperger's end of it can still like struggle in normal environments. it would just be go into the normal group.
Tell me a little bit more about what those struggles are. How could, if you were an organisation putting on a craft event, how would you make it accessible to people who have autism and Asperger's? What would you suggest they do?
I think something would be like, don't have food really close to where you're trying to work, because every single person is different. I find that the smell of orange juice is something that makes me feel really ill, but every autistic will be different, will have different experiences of it and what exactly it is. But if that's like right where you're working, someone walks by with orange juice, all of a sudden you feel ill and you have to leave. To not maybe avoid having loads of background music. I've been to some art classes where there's like classical music, just instrumental orchestral type pieces in the background at low volume. They're all right, but not to have loud background music. Those are some of the obvious things like having a sort of idea of what the sort of schedule is before the event starts can be helpful.
What about lighting?
Lighting, yeah, if the lights are too bright, that can be a problem as well. Not particularly because of the autism, but for my other conditions, I find that things like sodium lights can make me feel really ill. But they're only usually in older buildings, so I feel a lot more comfortable in newer buildings where I know it should be like LED lights. But I think those are the main things, because a lot of the things that make things really difficult for autistics aren't always things that other people can directly solve, because things around socializing and finding that stressful in one way or another can't entirely be solved, and some things aren't necessarily the organizer can control, because if someone walks into the room with really, really strong perfume on, or perfume that I perceive to be really strong, it's hard to ensure that doesn't happen. But if you are organising an event, it would be helpful to consider not wearing strong perfume on that day, just in case that makes someone feel ill.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
I think also as well, like all my health conditions, there is only a teensy bit of overlap in that sometimes you can be hypersensitive to touch, smells, those kind of things too. So even those that wouldn't be classed as neurodivergent, I think some other health conditions can cause issues with it if it's a very strong smell. I have the same with orange. Orange makes me very ill. I can't have anything to do with orange either, so even the smell of it does put me off as well. With my disability, it's a bit difficult because it's so many different layers to it. But what I've really liked seeing is certainly with Peterborough Presents and things like that, the more of the hybrid kind of learning aspect.
Okay.
So those of us that can't necessarily physically get out or have low immunity like I do, so sometimes different times you might have to isolate a bit more. Having video versions like you did with Faye, with reasonable adjustment, and that Hannah participated in doing the video as well. All of those things help. It helps those that can't physically be present feel a part of it still and not separated, that the work can still be contributed and joined in. And it helps also with the education aspect, because I think the thing that I really like about Peterborough Presents particularly is there is zero dumbing down of the skill level and of giving space to allow people to approach it at whatever level they might be. Yeah. So it makes it accessible to everybody. And if you're willing to want to up your skill level, there are things available for that. If you just want to go to relax, to be around other people that enjoy the same thing, there's those spaces available too. And often even within the same event, those two people kind of coexist very well and kind of work alongside each other sort of very positively too. Because I think I understand what Hannah means. Sometimes there is a focus on the very extreme end of learning disability and thinking that's disability covered, forgetting that many of us, we still need to be challenged. We still want to be challenged. We want to improve what we're doing. We want to advance in it. We want to see different things and interpret it. And I think the best thing about creativity, and the reason why I think disabled people do very well within this space, they don't always have the easiest access to it, and they're not always included in the heart of it, but they are incredibly skilled creative people, is because it comes to perception and seeing things differently. And also sort of necessity being the mother of all invention. We if the world is not fit for you or it's not easy for you, you have to become creative. You have no real choice. In order to thrive in it, you've got to adapt. You've got to think of different ways of getting somewhere, or different ways of holding a pen, different ways of sitting or working on the same thing and approaching something differently. And I think that's skills that I think every single disabled person has out of necessity, unfortunately. But then good things can come of it too. Those skills can be applied and used and sort of filled out.
Properties and the access to properties make a big difference as well, don't they?
Yeah.
Have they got any stairs? Are the doors wide enough? Is there a lift? Do you have a disabled toilet? Is that toilet used as a storage room, or can you actually get in and use the toilet?
Yeah, with all the kind of big coats and the mops and buckets and everything in it that you're tripping over with,
I just want to say I agree with what you said about that stuff being available online really helps. Sometimes just getting out is difficult. Because of my seizure condition, I will never be able to drive a car. So if there's not public transport, if I don't have someone who can take me, it's a lot easier for me to get to something online. Also, from an autistic perspective, if I'm at home in my house, I don't have all those sensory problems. Someone can't walk by me with strong perfume.
Yes, you've got more control, haven't you, in having that online session.
So you can focus on the actual thing you want to focus on rather than anything else. And I think there's also a lot of anxiety that gets built up, especially if you haven't been somewhere before, if it's a new building or a new organisation, you're not too sure. I think many of us probably would have had some negative experience or very anxious experience where we've kind of felt out of place or literally couldn't get into a building or couldn't find it, or when we got there realised that it was far too exhausting. Like one place they said there was lifts, but then they forgot to say that they hardly ever worked, and it was like up 4 flights of stairs. It's like, well, that's not happened. So you end up going home again, and it's that disappointment and all that kind of, or if you go, well, I can do the 4 flights, but when I get there, I won't be able to do anything when I get up there. Yeah. So like this whole thing is a bit kind of pointless. So I think you get used to kind of, when you've had those bad experiences, it takes a lot to get up that courage to try something else and to try again and to keep going. But the good thing is that a lot of places like Peterborough Presents and other organisations here are doing a good job of trying to address those problems. And of course you can't make everything perfect for everybody, and that's fine. But if you have enough variety and enough thought in it, then you make sure there is things available to.
It's also giving out enough information so that each one of us can make an informed choice of whether we turn up on the day or not.
The information absolutely does help a lot, from everything from, it's really difficult if they don't specify how long the session is or how it's structured or how much of it might be sitting down versus moving. Any of those information makes it super quick, because there are times when you'll see something and they're like, and you're like, okay, well, I've got to get a ticket now because it's going to run out. Then you get the ticket and you realise, okay, it's completely not accessible, or it's not, I can't fit that the way I need to, and then you can't, and then vice versa, you might miss out because you go, well, I'm not sure, so then you're emailing back and forth. By the time you've done that, it's all sorted out and gone. So
I've definitely been in those situations where you go along to something, or you're trying to listen to a talk, whatever, and all you can focus on is the thing that's really making you stressed in that moment. The orange juice, someone's perfume, and that you have to leave in that feeling of disappointment. But another thing is not only where people tell you the structure, the worst one I've experienced is going to something where they tell you the structure, they don't follow the structure. You say, what happened with that? And they say, oh yeah, that always happens. After that, I didn't go to that particular thing again because I decided that I could not cope with that.
So so keeping to what they said it was going to be helps.
Yes, autistics in particular, I think everyone can find that frustrating, but autistics in particular will find that very difficult. If you tell us that it's going to be that we're going to have 45 minutes of this, 50 minutes of that, 50 minutes of that, and then actually you find that you had 45 minutes and then 45 minutes, and the third thing never happened.
Right, I've got you. So just changing the subject a little bit, Hannah, tell me, what has creativity brought to your life? What has it done to help you, and has there been any difficulties along the way?
I think in the end, creativity has very much helped me socially. It from an autistic perspective, where things like just average, I guess, small talk, people would call it, is not something we find very comfortable. Having something to talk about when I meet new people, being able to talk about my art, or if I say, that I'm an artist, people then might ask questions about that, and that makes it a lot easier for me to slowly find out how to cope in this conversation. But It's also just, means that no matter what, I have something that I can sit and I can enjoy and I can do, and I can really occupy myself very happily with all my creative endeavours, which helps to fill time that I have to spend resting between going out to one social thing and the next. So it has definitely brought a lot of positives and a lot of enjoyment to my life, and I don't actually know how I would function without creativity, because it is so much of my life. It is inseparable from so many things. There are things about it that I've realised can be difficult. I at one point originally thought that I would want to be an artist as a full-time career. I really tried that for about 6 months last year, and then after that, I realised that that was not going to work, because the more I tried to make it my career, the less I actually enjoyed it. And so I've worked out that I want to have a balance. I'm not going to say I won't be an artist. I want to still do some of that. But I enjoy being involved in some of the different arts projects. It's not all about me drawing, but it's about being involved in different arts things. And just making that I find some other work that I do as part-time, and then I do being an artist part-time, so that I can balance those things.
So being involved in things, because you're involved in various projects on an advisory capacity as well with Peterborough Presents, is that right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about those and how that adds to your creative processes and everything about you.
I enjoy being part of that, seeing different parts of creativity, different people's types of creativity. Just being in creative spaces with other creatives can be really interesting. I've been to watercolour classes, and at the end everyone will kind of lean all of their paintings up against a wall, and everyone starts with the same subject, even if it's a vase of flowers, and all of the paintings are so different. And that's what's nice about being on panels, being with different people, as different people learn different things from each other. For instance, with the Lantern project actually, originally it was just, we're going to make these plain lanterns, and then I thought, and various people thought, what about decorating them? So I decorated one last time, and now decorating them has become more of a thing, and we thought, well, what if you mix the glue mixture with some paint? So I tried that, and it's really interesting how in that regard, being involved with other people, as other people contribute ideas to that creative process in a way that doesn't normally happen when I'm just kind of sat in my art room or at my computer drawing. That's a conversation between my head and the paper, essentially. But being involved in a project where that different people contribute ideas that would never have occurred to me otherwise.
So what does creativity mean to you, Hannah?
That's kind of an interesting one to try and explain, because it's a lot easier to explain something that means to you that you think about, like what you would feel if it wasn't there, whereas I can't imagine how my life would function without creativity. It is very much a way through which I function in the world. I can't function without it. I rely on creativity to reimagine and process things that have happened to me. That is a constant process. And from there, that can often come up with new ideas that become other types of creative projects. And it's quite hard to define what it means to me, but I suppose that it's really important, because I couldn't work without it because of how many different types of purposes it serves, from processing things to relaxing to enjoyment to sharing with other people. All of that's part of what creativity gives to me in my life.
Do you think you need qualifications to call oneself creative?
Definitely not. Creativity is not one of those things that can be measured by a piece of paper. I mean, a piece of paper actually doesn't measure very well anything. You might not pass in maths or English at a GCSE, but that doesn't mean that you can't functionally use it. That creativity, there's no real measure of creativity, because everyone is creative in their own way. Because problem solving is a type of creativity. It's not creative in a sense of art that people think about it, but it's still being able to think and come up with new ideas, which I guess is the sort of definition of creativity in a way.
Yeah.
And that's not very easy to find in any sense, because everyone's creativity is so different.
Law, what would you say to someone who thinks that they're not creative?
I agree with Hannah that we all have creativity within us. We all had to, because that's how we learn. Creativity and play and experimentation is all part of learning, and learning should never really stop. And like Hannah said, I think creativity is crucial to so many things. Just how we live day to day, how we interact with people, that all comes with creative. Then everything from, like you say, problem solving. I think the creativity, it's very much about seeing things in a different way, or asking what if questions, or what if it's from this way, what if we try this, what if we do that. So it's about that experimentation. And it's crucial for every aspect of life. The technology we use, that all came from a creative as well as an engineering perspective. With regards to formal qualifications, absolutely not. Qualifications can help in certain areas. I'm a firm believer in studying and learning, but it doesn't have to be in a formal way at all. It can be very much from your own sort of just practice, to reaching out to other people, learning from other people, absorbing everything. My nan, who was one of the most creative people, who infused creativity in every aspect of her life, would never call herself as an artist. She wanted to be one, and she felt because she didn't go to school to do one and she wasn't selling art, that meant she wasn't. This woman made wedding dresses, elaborate cakes for weddings, could sew anything, was great at gardening, cooking, whatever. I mean, she would throw herself into everything: sculpture, art, wood carving, whatever it was. She was extremely good at it. But to her, you couldn't possibly call yourself that unless you had, were selling or in galleries. And that's incredibly sad, because that's not true. She was, and always, is an art, she was an artist through every aspect. And I think that's also difficult for me, I think as well. I still struggle to call myself anything relating to art. I tend to just still more stick to the crafting label, but it doesn't really matter. Art, creativity, craft, whatever label you want to put it, it's all the same. It's people trying things, seeing how they work, seeing alternatives, and just experimenting with them.
I think people get a bit tied up around the word art and artistic, because you think you have to be a Picasso, and you need to be an opera singer, but actually creativity encompasses so many things. But to you, what can be classified as creative, do you think? Everything or nothing? Or
pretty much. I think pretty much anything. Even things like, there are some people that are just amazing conversationalists, and you wouldn't think a conversation requires creativity, but when you hear and listen to them, it's very much the art of oral storytelling, or the art of being able to be empathetic, or listen and responsive. That involves creativity, and just the way, even planning sometimes how to get to somewhere requires you to be creative in the way that you have to do it, because you can't necessarily go that route. So you're having to do this one, you might have to combine it or split it up and everything. So I think we all use creativity every day. We just don't always value it, or we don't always interpret it as being creative. So most people will have like about 10 or 11, whatever it may be, instances where they've been creative that day, but would never even consider what they did as being creative.
What do you think about that?
I think that's true, because people think of creativity only in terms of the arts, as it tends to be known. But, engineering and technology, computer programming, all of those things are kind of creativity. The same as with cooking. So you have to understand how different ingredients will go together if you're not following a recipe. All of those things are creativity. It's just that people value creativity in an art or a music sense more than often is done for other types of creativity, or at least that's the way that it sounds like it is, whether that's actually the case or not.
And Laura, what do you feel about Peterborough and the creative scene and organisations and events? Is there enough creativity in terms of things to do in Peterborough, or do you think we need more?
I will always say more. Might be just greed, but I think certainly, like, I've grown up in Peterborough. I was born in Peterborough, managed to escape briefly at uni, and then got sucked back. But I know, just get trapped back. But and certainly up until like about 5 or 6 years ago, it was incredibly difficult to find things locally. Firstly, anything creative was difficult to find. Second, they were nearly always either done in colleges or sort of more formal education aspects, and not the kind of more community-led ones that thankfully happen now. So it made it feel very stuffy or formal, or there was always a lot of cost to it because it was an official course rather than just kind of coming together and creating. I come from a working class background, so we were always used to using whatever you had around the house. You didn't have fancy equipment, you didn't have fancy tools, you were just using whatever you had. And part of the reason why I think we're so creative is because it was literally make your own play and amusement. So that was kind of an aspect to it. And then certainly when I was studying and did creative writing as part of my degree when I was at the Open University. That was about 10 years ago. I finished that one. And I loved it. I'd mainly been seen as pursuing a more academic path before, because there's still this myth going around that you've got to be one or the other, whereas a lot of people are both, and they are not mutually exclusive. And in fact, they work a lot better when you try and harmonize both. But so the idea was that I was more that way. Then I got ill, had to come back. Then, because I had a lot of extra time, but things I couldn't necessarily do more, so I lent more into the crafting and creative side. Then I sort of did, just for amusement, the creative writing course that then led on to the other degree. And
what other degree?
My first degree was politics and international relations. That I was meant to be a defence analyst until I got ill. Then I had to come back. I wasn't able to take the master's course to do that one.
Yeah.
So then the second one I got was a diploma in literature and creative writing. Then I got an English language degree after that.
Okay.
The OU is great if you have disabilities. At the time, it was the only way I could do any learning distance-wise, because it's about 10, 15 years ago. So I got into creative writing through that way, and then I really loved it. And I love the fact that sort of in literature, you can combine the academic with the creative. It's quite normal and natural. So that felt a nice kind of space to be in. But then after it, I found it very difficult to engage with any writing groups or reach out, in part because most of it was either in other places and not here where I could get to. There wasn't much as online like there is now, thankfully. COVID really helped with that, bringing a lot more online things back, and realising that people can do this and it helps. It opens things up to people who would normally be able to come. So it's really difficult. It's difficult to do even like writing groups, because I didn't have the energy to match. I couldn't edit other people's, so I'd feel really guilty about people giving me feedback on my work and then me not being absent for like a few weeks or a few months and then not contributing back. So it made you feel very kind of out of place that you weren't doing it. You felt you couldn't keep up with just the way you had to submit things and the way that you had to submit them at the time. It was still very formalised in the way to do it. And when I was in lockdown, I was in isolation for a very long time, a bit longer than most. And it was great to finally see that locally there was these things popping up all online, because everything had to move very quickly online.
Yeah.
The local organisations, people were very good at adapting very quickly with it. So it's suddenly great to suddenly see all these places pop up that I hadn't seen for like years or didn't know existed. And that's how I found Peterborough Presents. And that's how I got in contact with you. So as I started to come out of isolation, I thought I really want to get more involved. So I reached out to Peterborough Presents, and then they very kindly brought me on. And then a few months later, I was doing the workshop and then involved in the panel for reasonable adjustment and things like that as well. So it's opened up so much. And that was just from me seeing things suddenly starting happening online, because for about, like I said, for a very long time here, there wasn't things that I could get to.
Yeah.
And certainly not with my complex kind of conditions. I was still very poor understanding of it. And especially with being an invisible disability, sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult to get people to understand.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to not only find that there's a lot of arts and creative activity going on it, but also that the organisations were taking access and inclusion more seriously, not just with disability, but also in other areas as well, with working class communities, those ones that I was traditionally part of. And seeing so many free events, I mean, that would have made a huge difference to my life growing up, because I come from a single parent family, from a council estate. We didn't have money for things. I had to stop dancing because we couldn't afford it anymore. I just started at ballet again, actually in the same school that I was at when I was 5 and 6 years old. One of my earliest memories was dancing on the Key Theatre stage when I was 3 years old. And then I found out that when my health got worse and I got nerve damage, I wanted to try and improve the strength and flexibility. And so I went back and asked about dance lessons, see if I could get the ballet to help kind of improve it. A few ignored because I'm an adult with a disability. So a few dance schools refused to even respond to the email, but thankfully one did. And that's been fantastic, just having that, sort of getting back to that. And it seems very bizarre, sort of at 40, just got to say, you know, suddenly taking it back up again. And when, the last time I was doing it was very, very little. But I would never have stopped dancing if I had access to those kind of classes.
Yeah.
And then seeing all the wonderful things people are doing with dance and, you know, just arts in general, I would have been loving this when I was little. So it's lovely that it's been now a lot more accessible for people, and people are going within the communities to where it's most needed, and that they're very, you know, open to those discussions. I just wish more places would do that.
Yeah.
But but it is great that it's happening, and certainly it's a lot better now than it was. But
And Hannah, what advice would you give to other disabled people in Peterborough who want to maybe tap into their creative side? Where to start, how to start, what confidence things, and could you offer advice to them?
I think I'm not entirely sure what I want to say, because I've found that creativity happened very naturally. I've always liked to create stuff, although there was a point in my life at which I really got into creativity. Even as a child, rather than like, why have some sort of pre-made toy, I'd like to make something out of cardboard. I really enjoyed that and the creative aspect of it. Then it was about in 2016 I discovered digital painting. That was what really got me into art in a more serious sense. But some of it is actually that you just, it seems like a simple thing to say, but I guess you just start. Once anything, if you never start it, you will never like improve it. It's art is a journey. You're constantly improving. Even when you look back at what you've done, you go, oh, I feel like now I've reached the stage of some of those artists that I used to admire years ago. You're still learning, you're still improving things, and it is just a process. You do one drawing, and each drawing you learn something. Even if the drawing was nominally a failure because it wasn't what you wanted it to be, you learned something about it. I find that I will try a new style, I'll try a different something, and sometimes I'll go, yes, that worked, and sometimes I'll look at that and go, well, I know not to do that again. And actually perhaps that's the important thing, is to, art is one of those things that people critique themselves a lot. That, you know, someone, if the first time they go into the kitchen to try and cook, they're not going to expect in the same sense that, oh, it's going to be as good as someone who's been cooking for the last 20 years. But with art, there's this sort of thing, if you can't do it immediately, oh, you failed permanently. But it's really not like that. Even if the drawing doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, and that applies to everyone else as well, that's still a learning. You will have learned something from that process, and that's just as valuable.
And Laura, what advice would you give someone who's disabled in Peterborough that wants to start getting their creative juices flowing?
Reach out to anyone and everyone. Just ask what's available. If you're worried about if it's not accessible for you, ask. Just literally ask. Most places want you to come, and they will do what they can to help you feel comfortable. I think there is still a problem with it. It can be very difficult to advocate for yourself, and especially there's a thing that you don't want to be seen as sort of different or awkward or causing too much of a problem or a scene, but you're not. You're literally just stating what you need to join in, and everyone wants you to join in, so please do. If they are not as welcoming as they should be, don't worry, there'll be another organisation out there that will be, and then we'll tackle that issue when we need to. And then also that online, reach out, anything. Online videos are super helpful if you can't get there in person. If there's something you want to create, reach out. Most of these organisations are very responsive to ideas and suggestions. So if there's something not happening that you really want to happen, absolutely, that's what I did. I just reached out and I said, you know, this is a situation that I'm in. I want to do X, Y, Z. I'm not sure how to do it. I didn't know if you had any advice. And then there was like a whole world kind of opened up just
Yeah.
from that one kind of email.
So ask.
Yeah, just ask. And also don't be afraid to try. There's this thing that, like you said, about having to be perfect first time round, but it's a natural ability you have. It's a skill like any other.
Yeah.
So you practice, you will improve regardless. And there are other benefits to it too, the community aspect, the just enjoying sitting around with other people. And it can just be a starting point. Even if that particular craft isn't your thing, you might learn from someone else another idea or see a different version of it and then go, that's the way I want to go out. So just try. Just have fun with it. Don't, panic and just.
Something I have thought of that I would like to say is that in terms of digital painting, that's not something that's really organisations for or things that are in person. If my best advice for someone looking to get into digital painting is to look up speed paints on YouTube. I put some out myself. They're essentially where someone's taken a time lapse of their work and sped it up, and you can watch those and kind of think, how are they doing this, and learn from that. People can think that it's difficult to get into it because of having the tools. There are great free digital painting programs out there. The one I use is called Fire Alpaca. That's a free one. I've been using it for years and I really like that. You can also get into digital art through drawing with a mouse. I started drawing with a mouse. I do use a drawing tablet now because mice don't have like pressure sensitivity and the things that really make it work. But if you just want to see, is this something you enjoy? Yes, you can definitely start drawing just with a computer or with an iPad. You can start from there and go onwards.
This has been an absolutely brilliant chat. Thank you so much for joining me today. We will put your contact details out at the end if you'd like us to. Do you have any social media that people can contact you and chat to you with that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as @dragonsflyatsunset. That's dragons as in like the mythical creature rather than dragonfly. That one gets confused a lot.
So dragons fly sunset.
Dragons fly at sunset. That's AT rather than like an @ symbol.
Got you.
So I'm on Instagram, which is mainly I think the place where people can contact me. I do have a website, which is dragonsflyatsunset.blogspot.com. And I do have a YouTube channel as well, where I post, which is again @dragonsflyatsunset. So, and the thing I put up on there is the speed paint time lapses for my digital work.
Amazing. And Laura, do you have any?
Instagram @law.green and website that needs to be updated badly. But I'm not technical, but it will be coming, and that's www.law-green.com.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed today.
Thank you.
And that's all for today's episode and for season 1 of the podcast. Remember, all episodes from season 1 are available for download on most podcast apps. If you enjoy watching instead, please visit the Peterborough Presents YouTube channel for the complete episodes. We'd love to produce a second season, so please like and subscribe and share with everyone you know. Your support means the world to us. I'm Julie Fernandez. Thank you for tuning in.